Good afternoon, good morning, everybody who are joining us from Europe or across the Atlantic. I will just give it a moment until we have a critical mass. I see that people are joining the call. Again, good morning, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us. My name is Zsuzsanna Végh. I'm a visiting fellow at the Engaging Central Europe program of the German Marshall Fund. I would like to very warmly welcome all of you to today's discussion, which is going to tackle the issue of Russia's cyber war against Ukraine. So over the past decade, Ukraine has essentially been both a victim and a testing ground for a very new type of warfare, which is not only fought on the battlegrounds, but also in cyberspace. This type of warfare essentially blurs the lines between state and non-state actors. It involves not only troops on the ground, but also volunteers, but also hackers and increasingly private actors, including technological companies, corporations. This setup, with all of its complexities, raises a big array of questions, and we will try to tackle some of these through the case of Ukraine. We will focus on both the specifics, how cyber warfare has unfolded in Ukraine over the past decade, but we will also touch on what it means for the international community. We want to discuss what this experience means specifically for Ukraine, how the country reacted to it, how it is tackling cyber attacks and informational attacks. We will discuss what the role of citizens and non-state actors are in this conflict, and we will cover what it implies for European and international cyber policy as a whole. To explore this really complex topic, we have three excellent speakers with us today. Khrystyna Kvartsiana, who is a ReThink.CEE fellow at the German Marshall Fund. Nad'a Kovalčíková, who is a senior analyst at the EU Institute for Security Studies. And we also have with us Maksym Dvorovyi, who is head of digital rights at the Digital Security Lab, Ukraine. In the next roughly hour and a half, we will hear first Khrystyna's presentation of her research that she has conducted as part of her ReThink.CEE fellowship. And then we will hear the thoughts and opinions of Nad'a and Maksym. We will, of course, have a Q&A session and would like to involve you all. So please feel free to share your questions in the chat or in the Q&A function. We will be picking up your questions, posing them to the experts who can then answer you directly. So we can also record their reflections. You will not be getting the answers in writing. Before we get started, I just want to make a little bit of an advertisement for our ReThink.CEE fellowship, which is, as I mentioned, what Khrystyna has completed with us as well. This is a one-year non-residential fellowship program at the German Marshall Fund, targeting especially Central European, Eastern European, and Western Balkans experts who are under 35 and have some creative project ideas tackling regional challenges that the countries of this geography face. And this fellowship happens to be open for new applicants. At the moment, we are welcoming applications until mid-January. I will post the link to the call in the comments in the chat. So please feel free to check it out and also share it in your network if you find it interesting. I will also share Khrystyna's paper in a moment. But I would now like to give the floor to her to introduce you what she actually spent her past year on. Khrystyna, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Zsuzsanna, and thank you all. Before diving into this discussion of my paper, I would like to express my really sincere gratitude to you and the entire team of Berlin office, like Nick, Jörg, Daniel, and Alevtina. Thank you very much for your support throughout this fellowship. It was a truly remarkable experience for me, so thank you. I'm also very grateful to the distinguished discussants we have today with me on this webinar for their time and availability to read my paper and comment, and the online participants that have joined and are still joining. It's really it means a lot to me. Thank you all for your attention. So now coming back to my paper, I would like to give you probably 5 main takeaways from my research and leave the rest to the discussion because it's a lot of information there. But if you allow me, I would like to start by explaining why did I embark on researching this topic. So first of all, the war in Ukraine is the largest military conflict of the cyber age and the first to incorporate such a significant levels of cyber operations on all sides. And since February last year, we saw many things that challenged common perception of Ukraine's defense capabilities and society resilience, lots of which was relying on the use of digital technologies. There's been much written on this matter for the international public, but not so much by Ukrainians themselves. For many reasons, including the fact that many cyber experts in Ukraine are currently fighting in the armed forces. So my first motivation was to offer an international reader an overview of cyber war in Ukraine from a perspective of a Ukrainian. Probably very biased, but I hope very needed. So for me, it was very important to show this continuity of war since 2014, which was called by many names on the West, including hybrid war, which is a very unclear term because it blurs these boundaries between war and peace, adding up these additional layers of unconventional warfare methods like cyber warfare, informational warfare, etc. But for us in Ukraine, it was a war, a military invasion, very clear with the land-grabbing presence of Russian regular forces on another country's sovereign territory. Thousands of dead, despite of not having been recognized as such. And ironically, the cyberspace was probably the only domain where the international community was not or did not choose to be blind about the Russian interference. Indeed, when you look at the most impactful cyber attacks on Ukraine since 2014, like Black Energy that hit major regional, like 3 major regional electricity companies in December 2015, or Crash Override that hit the central electricity grid Ukrenergo in December 2016, or NotPetya that caused $10 billion damage to the global economy, they were all attributed to Russian state actors well before February 2022. So this is all to say that Ukraine's resilience, and in particular resilience in cyber domain, didn't appear in the vacuum, but was a result of an 8-year battle in the information space, which gave this push to creation of multiple cyber volunteer movements, like for instance, Cyber Alliance, and pushed digital literacy and fact-checking journalism, like to deconstruct this the Russian narratives about war in Ukraine. Starting from the attack on the central electoral system during the first democratic elections, basically after Euromaidan, and following through all these cyber attacks that I just mentioned, these were the critical events shaping Ukraine's cyber policy, which, as I'm arguing in my paper, sticks more to a reactionist rather than strategic planning approach. Before moving to the next point, I would like just to stress probably one disclaimer, namely, when reading my paper, you'll find acts that refer both to cyber and informational warfare in common understanding of the term. It's done on purpose, mainly because I approached it from a rather instrumental point of view, meaning like cyber warfare for me here was an intersection between hardware, software, infrastructure, and content. So regardless of the means used, being it, for instance, destroying digital infrastructure, conducting an informational psychological operation on social media, I was analyzing Russian actions in cyberspace in terms of their effect and purpose, which was and still is undermining Ukrainian statehood and national security. So the second point I'd like to stress is that since the full-scale invasion, we can observe the change of tactics in the Russian cyber warfare against Ukraine. After Viasat attack and defacing governmental websites at the beginning of the full-scale invasion, intelligence collection outgrew the destructive cyber attacks in numbers, and the tactics have become more adaptable and combined with kinetic warfare operations. So depending on the war phase, they changed the targets. For example, media outlets were amongst the key targets at the beginning of the invasion, to sort of like broadcast the quick victory, that the government fell, etc., escaped, while the governmental institutions and major Ukrainian private companies that financially support the armed forces are amongst the key targets right now. The most commonly used techniques at this stage after the full-scale invasion were spear phishing campaigns and cyber espionage. They accounted for 70% of all operations and eventually outpaced destructive cyber attacks. The third point is the evolution of Ukraine's cyber policy and enforcement apparatus in the field of cyber defense. Here, as I was saying, it was more a reaction to the damage caused by the cyber attacks, not like a very well-planned cybersecurity policy. Here, starting from the NotPetya attack in 2017, the law on basic principles of ensuring cybersecurity was adopted, following by a cybersecurity strategy in 2021. Those are, so to say, two programming documents, two milestones of cyber policy in Ukraine. They define the key institutions that are that form this state system of cyber defense, like SBU, State Service of Spatial Communications, National Bank, etc. They meet on the regular basis under the coordination of the Council of National Security and Defense, but on the more mass level of implementation of cybersecurity standards by businesses, companies, so like not the highest national level authorities, there has not been yet implemented, a common standard, let's say like NIS directive, for instance, in the EU. But okay, last but not least about the cyber policy is that on February 1st, last year, so February 2022, the president signed a decree on the plan of realization of this cybersecurity strategy, which was already like sort of an attempt to kind of put forward the concrete steps how this strategy is supposed to be implemented, with 94 concrete tasks to be completed by various state institutions in the field of cyber defense. But as of today, for obvious reasons, many of these deadlines are unmet, unfortunately. Some of them are like being ongoing, or the implementation already started, like for instance, training with NATO cyber teams, but most of it, especially the system of monitoring of this plan, like is still absent. So overall, we can say that the system of cyber defense in Ukraine, like legislation-wise, is still not complete, since the existing laws provide rather a framework than a standards for all. There is no clear enforcement mechanism. And the last attempt to introduce it was the draft law 8087 that passed the first reading, but hasn't passed yet the second one. It's kind of debatable in Ukrainian civil society because it would introduce too much power to one state institution, and it was like criticized and adjusted and criticized again. So now we will see if it's going to pass or not. The fourth point concerns several steps made by Ukraine in cyber domain that proved effective for society resilience in this war. I'm going to name some of them. For the rest, I will leave you read my paper that Zsuzsanna shared in the chat. So those are cooperation with private big tech companies, both in terms of exchange of intelligence on cyber incidents, use of data centers, and strengthening cyber capabilities. We know that several American companies such as Amazon, Google, and above all Microsoft are very involved in helping Ukrainian government address the war effects. Second step is moving the governmental data to the cloud so that the digital public services kept functioning. For Ukraine, this decision was actually vital, as having most of the public services digitalized. Data centers with governmental data were and still are of critical importance, and they were among the first targets of Russian missiles in the first days of the invasion. So moving this data to the cloud was very important. Legalizing cryptocurrencies allowed charitable foundations and also government, like receiving donations from abroad much faster. So this was achieved through the adoption of the law on virtual assets that was also passed in the first days of the invasion, if I'm not mistaken. And support and cooperation, of course, with civil society to strengthen citizens' skills regarding cybersecurity. So there, the paradigm of perceiving the importance of cybersecurity really changed since the full-scale invasion. If you talk now to many civil society organizations that provide this training for other CSOs or local authorities or even armed forces, they would tell you that like there was a critical change in the perception, because before you had to kind of convince people why you need to be cautious about cybersecurity. Now it's more people come to you and like they are motivated to analyze specific cases, so the perception of it has really changed. And of course, cooperation with NATO and EU countries. After the hot phase of the war, lots of the steps that has been done will require, of course, further attention and consideration in policy, because they bring with them lots of leverages, challenges, for the government, because with big investment come also the big power over Ukrainian government. We saw that on the case with Starlink help from SpaceX. But yes, I will leave also this part to the discussion. Finally, fifth point, the counteroffensive that I tackle in my paper. Here, I would say that officially Ukraine sticks only to defensive doctrine in the war with Russia. The governmental officials that I interviewed for this paper also confirmed this stand. So the state institutions responsible for cyber defense are not authorized by law to respond to Russian cyber attacks on critical infrastructure with the reciprocal ones. Their responsibility is only to deter and prevent cyber attacks and to strengthen the resistance of national information systems. However, in the media, you'll see information about the existence of so-called cyber troops de facto operating inside the Ukraine state institutions and above all, Ukraine armed forces. This is a bit confusing because officially the creation of such troops in Ukraine was supposed to happen by the end of this year, but it hasn't happened yet. There was no law adopted yet on this. So for now, the IT army, the volunteer group of people that coordinate among themselves and attack Russian state institutions, they are the most known threat actor that successfully hit many targets, including, for instance, Russian stock exchange market and other institutions. This IT army, it's hard to conceptualize in legal terms because it's not operating within the legal framework of Ukrainian state, but it was created at the urge of one governmental official. So for instance, like the information that it is using clearly suggests that there might be some exchange of intelligence between the volunteers of this group and the government, but officially there is not such a proof. There is a challenge, though, that it poses now, since it grew big. At its peak, it had like around 300,000 subscribers. Now it's a little bit less, but the participants of this group really are risking to be basically framed as participants of war. That's why the institutionalization of the cyber troops in Ukrainian legislation is especially pertinent, given that the operations of this IT army can be interpreted as if they were becoming participants in war. So that would make them, in the eye of international law, legitimate targets for Russian government because they are attacking, amongst other things, civilian infrastructure in Russian Federation. So kind of legalizing these people would have granted them additional layer, let's say, of international protection. So they would have a status of combatants, which is very different from just like any random person participating in the war and attacking civilian infrastructure. But this hasn't happened yet. Apparently, there are several draft laws about to be registered on the cyber troops. The discussion that is ongoing is about the strategy that Ukraine has to take about like understanding legally what would be the cyber defense or counteraction for this specific cyber troops. So would it be like defend forward like in the US, or would it be more like just operating within your national borders and so on and so forth? One last remark I'd like to add is that researching this topic and interviewing people involved in this process made me assume also that the cyber war is likely to persist beyond the eventual conclusion of the conventional military hostilities. And to address this, a reform is needed in the way we address cyber crimes committed by governments internationally. In this regard, one of the essential impacts Russian cyber warfare against Ukraine had is that it triggered the discussion of extending the jurisdiction of the International Court of Justice to investigating cyber crimes, which, for instance, unlike the war crimes, might be easier to prove in terms of intent, because when investigating war crimes, like they could always say that, you know, we hit the nuclear power plant, but we didn't plan to, while when you hit the electricity, like power grid, you do intend to. So that's a little bit good news. Recent statements by the ICC prosecutor indicate that such prosecutions under the court's jurisdiction are increasingly probable. So, but after that, the ICC itself was also a victim of cyber attack. So here I stop, leaving most of it to our discussion and encouraging you to check the document, which I guess Zsuzsanna shared in the chat. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Khrystyna. Indeed, the paper is shared in the chat. So for those of you who may have joined later, we have been discussing Khrystyna's research on Russia's cyber war on Ukraine. It was conducted as part of her ReThink.CEE fellowship, and it is now available in the form of a policy paper on our website. I have shared the link in the chat, but we'll also pop it up once more later on. I would now like to give the floor to Nad'a for a round of first reactions, and then to Maksym. In the meantime, if you have any questions, please feel free to drop them in the Q&A. Nad'a, thank you for joining us today. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon to everyone who is also watching us. I'd like to start with the words of congratulations to Khrystyna for her paper, because I find it not only extremely well researched, but also I like the way you structured it, and you mentioned in the beginning how you almost even apologize for combining cyber and information manipulation, information of the topic and different tools and tactics. And I find that's actually quite a large added value of your article, where you're putting the cyber attacks and cyber intrusions in the context of other tools that are aiming to undermine or harm the systems, the institutions, the political processes. You speak about the elections there as well, about the democracy. And so I would like to actually praise you for that, that it's, I think, extremely well connected and shows the nexuses quite clearly with very concrete examples. And I think that helps to illustrate your points across the whole article, where you really use these examples to showcase different incidents. And I think you provide a lot of additional data value that researchers may build on later on within this topic. So that's one. Second, I also really like how you are taking us through the time frame a little bit. You are walking us through how it all started already in 2014, but it's part of a broader strategy that is ongoing for a long time. And you bring us to basically legislative acts, to concrete tools and operations today. So that also is quite a nice way for a reader to understand the context of all of these operations. And I think when we talk about different manipulation in the digital space or elsewhere, the context is critical to understanding of the scale and also of the effect, as you mentioned, and you discussed briefly in your presentation as well. Thirdly, I'd like to emphasize the importance of different actors that you mentioned there. You also touched upon it briefly during your presentation, that this is going beyond the state actors and just one country attacking the other, but there are many actors involved on both sides, on the side of aggressions or interference attacks, but also on the side, especially in Ukraine, when you speak, there are a lot of the volunteers or the civilians actually participating in the defense operations. And I would like to actually pose you a couple of questions as well, if you have chance to address afterwards. In a way, you discuss this institutionalization of these volunteer efforts, and how do you see, for example, on the front of IT army that you talk about, or the volunteers on the cyber activists or others, how do you see it evolving actually to make them more institutionalized, considering your research and your interviews that you led? Where is this going at the moment, and is it something that is actually even, I would say, desired currently by the legislators, right? Because it does add some value to the operations, but at the same time, it could potentially protect those participants a bit more if it's integrated into the institutionalized system. So I would like to hear your views. And also, you talk a lot about this proactive and reactive measures, or defensive and offensive measures. And you mentioned it in your article little bit, that Ukraine also undertook offensive measures as part of the warfare and the strategy to be more effective on the battleground with the actor as Russia, using these operations very, very frequently. But as you know, in the EU context, this is a very debated way of when you want to and you are defending against this type of offensive operations. There are certain parameters within which the actors stay and then don't go beyond. But Ukraine does and has done, and I would like to hear your views. How do you not only how effective you think or necessary it is, but also which ones perhaps you found the most useful offensive measures that you think potentially could be replicable or should be in some case, or have been even beyond Europe, because you also talk about other countries in your article, and we may go to this international aspect later on perhaps, but as you speak of the digital sphere and these attacks beyond the national borders, not only that they are happening from beyond the territories of Russia, Ukraine, or so, but they are also impacting, right, these other countries. So do you think that when you talk about the international law and the legislation, do you see a progress, having all these examples, all this experience from Ukraine, shared through different research studies? Do you see evolution on the international law front to address these, global digital threats? So I'll just end it here. Really liked your article. Fully recommend it to everyone who's working on this and who is listening to us. And I look forward to your answers and the discussion.
Thank you very much, Nad'a. Khrystyna, since you got so many questions, actually, before moving on to Maksym, I would give you the opportunity to address already some of them, if you like. And there were many things that we can also later on circle back to. And I would also like to later on pick Nada''s brain a little bit, especially on the international dimension. But if you would want to jump in already with some of the answers, then we can do that. If you need more time, we can go on to
maybe I can touch base if I took a good note of all of the questions, because there were many. So let's say, how do you see the evolving institutionalization of the participants of Ukraine IT army and those taking part in the offensive measures against Russia? Well, I see it first, whether I see it as a needed option, because I feel like these people, some of them, most of them probably would prefer, I mean, I'm just now hypothesizing here. So we cannot actually project the behavior of all of them. But from the sources that I interviewed, I know that many of them are already moved like from this unclear volunteer clique or group to the official institution. So they are working already in like cyber divisions of different state institutions or in the armed forces. So many of them are like already sort of having a legal status. That brings us to the question whether like all the others can do the same, or whether we need like a special law protecting these people. I don't know. I feel like the legislative system has to their existence. So we should have this as an option. I don't know how imposable it should be, because absolutely, as it was and it still is like a collective of volunteers, we cannot like possibly trace or force them to all at once declare their status as I don't know, Ukraine digital or cyber combatant. This is not the case, and but I feel like having this option, maybe for some of them, also based on the sources that I interviewed, would be desirable, just to have this as an option. So this is one. About how necessary offensive measures are. This is a tricky question. This is a tricky question because it sort of correlates with our understanding what is active defense measures. And in the case of Ukraine, it's very hard to well, after 2 years almost of active, like full-scale military confrontation, and we are now approaching like a decade of war with Russia. So in the case of Ukraine, I would say it's being perceived more like welcoming to broaden the horizons and to consider like attacking, say, airfields from which the Russian area like carriers or missiles are taking off, but that are located on Russian sovereign land, but at the same time are about to take off and throw bombs on Ukraine. Like, this is considered a defensive measure, or it's an offensive measure? I would say like in Ukrainian space, it would be rather considered acceptable to apply. I'm sorry for taking so long to answer. I'm choosing the words to be very politically correct and to fight Ukrainian inside me, to be more of an analyst at this moment. But yes, we say that taking active defensive measures, including in cyberspace. So that would mean like defending forward and just deterring and preventing the emerging threats that emerge outside of Ukrainian borders, but are directed against Ukrainian national interests, can be considered acceptable. And then the last question was about the progress of international legal frameworks about the cyber crimes, right? Okay, I think for that I will take a little bit to reflect, also because I have Maksym after me, and he is a lawyer. So I think I would need to think it through like a couple more seconds. Maybe he will also start about it, and then I will complete, or vice versa. But yeah, I think I would pass the floor to Maksym right now.
Thank you, Khrystyna. Maksym, please feel free to go ahead. And then we will open up the floor also for our audience to pose questions. Again, this is just a word of encouragement for everybody to share their questions in the Q&A panel. Maksym, please go ahead. Maksym, are you with us?
Yeah, unfortunately, I'm struggling with internet connection all day, so sorry for that, and I might be a bit, the connection might be a bit problematic during my intervention, but I will try doing my best to, like, pick it up and make it on time. So when it comes to the international framework and the development of the international framework, in this regard, we actually do see some significant development generally related to cyber warfare and information warfare, even though we're not really talking that much about that, because beforehand, that was mostly like the application of the usual role, the usual international humanitarian law towards cyberspace, and it was mostly made in an attempt to just generally apply the general principles of itself towards cyber attacks. And the power manual, which was developed by mostly by academic society, and even though this document was supported by NATO, it never really gained the formal status. And it's mostly on for infrastructure, and it never really covered the scope of how freedom of expression can be weaponized, how information can be weaponized, and this has not been covered yet. From what I know, there's going to be some updates to the talent manual, which will cover this scope as well, and probably in the nearby future, it will also lead to some sort of a, I don't know how to put it, not standardization of the options or cyber forces. It's probably not the best word to describe that, but at least it may sort of set up an initial, I don't know, initial background to how it's going to happen. How it's going to influence Ukraine's legislation and Ukraine's policy is also an interesting thing, because indeed, from what Khrystyna has told in her presentation,
Maksym, I'm afraid we have lost you.
Sorry, can you hear me still?
Now we hear you again, but what you have been just saying, I'm afraid didn't come through. So could you maybe please try to repeat this last trail of thought?
Okay, the last trail of thought regarding the Ukraine's development, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, okay, so yeah, from what I heard, and I can confirm Khrystyna's statements, that there are some developments. Oh, I will try to speak closer to the mic, but I'm not sure that. Yeah, it's most likely the internet connection, but I will try to speak louder. So again, when we talk about the developments in the Ukrainian legislation, I do know that there is an attempt to draft the law of cyber forces, which will kind of envision the structure of the forces, their main activities, what they should do and what they should not do. But I'm not really sure whether the scope is going to be a detailed one, and whether the scope should really be a detailed one, because the majority of things like the tactics, the strategic operations of the forces, they should not really be described in the publicly available law, because this will basically just open up the space for the opposing belligerent party to understand how it functions and how it works. Again, we'll see how it goes. We'll see how it is gonna work. We will see how it's gonna influence the volunteers, such as the Cyber Alliance, IT Army, and so on. And I'm not like we cannot be 100% sure that this is going to be a legal development because it's quite a novel one. Usually it's all developed on the level of basic just army manuals, and it's not, and some of them are not really being made public for the research purpose. I would also like to add up briefly on general description of Ukraine's state institutions and combatant cyber warfare, because it has actually been quite a good experience in preventing mass effects of these attacks on the Ukrainian population after the start of the full-scale invasion. Because as a person still being here on the ground, I can attest to the fact that that we haven't really seen any major influence from directly cyber attacks. So even though some of them were being coordinated, as there is a question in the Q&A about this, and there is certain information in Khrystyna's papers in this regard, I would say like that the power of kinetic use of force, rather than the use of cyber force or malware or whatever it has been much more dangerous for the entire population. And in practice, we haven't really seen that many effects now, on the contrast to what we saw in the period between 2014 and 2021. At the same time, I should raise one issue which is quite important, unfortunately, and which is not being talked about loudly inside Ukraine's, even inside Ukraine's society, for some reasons, including self-censorship. We do have now a sort of an umpire in the national Ukrainian system, which is sometimes even abuses its power, because after the introduction of the legal regime of the martial law, we did have established a new regulator, which is called the National Center for Operation of Tech, whatever, management of the electronic communications management. In brief, it is called the NCU in the Ukrainian system. And unfortunately, what we have here is that they are trying to help citizens on the basic level of combating certain incidents such as phishing or so on, and they are trying to block websites, block the Russian segment of internet, so on, but they are doing it while some of the measures are actually necessary. There might be a question regarding the proportionality of this issue. So in this regard, it is a bit problematic that the martial law actually created in the Ukraine. So that's my introduction.
Thank you very much, Maksym. Khrystyna, would you have any immediate reactions? And also, mindful of the time, I just want to put a question up front to Nad'a to follow you, because Nad'a unfortunately needs to leave at the hour. Nad'a, we were reflecting on some of the lessons learned. Khrystyna was also touching on some of these. You were also asking her about it. So after her question of mine would be to you, looking at the developments in Ukraine through an EU lens, what would be your assessment? What kind of lessons the international community can draw from cyber warfare in Ukraine, and what are the next steps that as the EU we need to work on and move forward? Before going to that, Khrystyna, I would like to give you the floor.
Yeah, thanks very much, Zsuzsanna. I hope I didn't lose too much of what Maksym was saying, because at the beginning we had some problems with connection. So to add to the previous round of questions about the progress of this evolution of international legal framework from that Nad'a asked me, I think that was the last question. So from what I learned when preparing this article, this paper, is that it turns out that there was already a first attempt to submit this appeal to the International Court of Justice under Article 15 by the Berkeley School of Human Rights, I think, in cyberspace or something like this. The group of scholars did it about the NotPetya attack, provided it the global scale of the damage that it caused. They suggested to prosecute it under the jurisdiction of International Court of Justice. This was the first attempt, and now they sort of relaunched it again with the more cyber attacks that were preceding basically the full-scale invasion. And so far what we have, of course, the transformations in the international legal system do not move as fast as we would like them to. It's just a comment and the policy paper of one prosecutor from the ICC that says that they are considering opening up this kind of cases for the prosecution of by the ICC. This is like from the international side. From Ukrainian side, talking to the ex-deputy head of State Service of Special Communications, they also affirmed that they were in the group of together with the group of international experts, legal experts, building up the case to sort of like to push this forward also with the ICC, but and I saw some like media news on the media about this, but I didn't see the actual document. Strangely enough, this person recently resigned from this position because there was a corruption scandal in the State Service of Special Communication. So now this end like didn't lead me to eventual evolution of the top of the matter. So this is what we have now, basically. I don't know, maybe later Maksym wants to add something on the like broader international framework, like cyber crimes prosecuted as war crimes and so on. That's all from my side. I pass the floor back to you.
Thank you, Khrystyna. We will then circle back maybe later to the issue of international prosecution of cyber crimes, and there will be a lot to explore still with Maksym and Khrystyna, but I would now like to pass the floor to Nad'a.
Thank you very much, Zsuzsanna, and I'll try to cover the three aspects you mentioned with regards to the lessons, the assessment for international community, and then what could be the next steps, or how can we leverage this further. So I mentioned a few points that stood out from your piece that I thought were very important. And so when it comes to, I think, good practices or some lessons identified from the experience that Ukraine had, one of them, what I thought were very telling, was that going through this experience that is, very active, basically warfare time, it gives different type of insights to what works, what doesn't work, what are the costs of the use of certain tools, and it also exposed how the infrastructure is being built and what needs to be adapted. And you also mentioned, Khrystyna, in your piece, how these digital reforms basically were continuing throughout the active war, and how it's important to keep this continuity of reforming while at the same time being responsive and reactive and countering. And so this is one of the lessons why I think it's important to have some resilience built measures as much as possible, because we will always be facing new things when the crisis or conflict comes. But we already have a lot of lessons from Ukraine, from Georgia, from many other conflicts that have been using or part of hybrid warfare, where I think investment into the resilience building in the peacetime is important, even though it doesn't seem that urgent or critical. And I think that's one of the lessons that I think at the international level are very much aware of. But when we have to strike a balance between countering immediate threats and investing into something that is building the resilience, but we don't see the result of it right away, can be politically sometimes challenging. But showing these examples of Ukraine, how important it is to have that resilience embedded and inoculate the citizens, as it was also mentioned, that you mentioned it in your piece, how the communication from the official authoritative sources about what can be narrated by Russia when it was about the deepfake video and the President Zelensky's resignation that was fake and all of this, but there was information that this type of videos or narratives will be coming. You also mentioned that in your research, and it was proven that there was less responsiveness to that, or it has less effect. So investments in resilience building in peacetime, critical. Also, what I think it's important at the international level, even though we are engaging within the kind of state actors landscape, is this showcasing of the role of civil society and how critical it was to be countering these operations. Because it's not only the state, but also non-state actors that are aggressive, and civil society has different types of access and maybe tools and the reach to communities. And so I think engagement of civil society in building these measures, I think it's very good lesson, and could be a lot of good practices, I think, implemented from Ukraine. One of the examples that many times when we are talking about hybrid warfare, many times it's narrated as non-military, non-conventional. But here in Ukraine, we also see how the military strikes correlated with the cyber intrusions and cyber attacks at the same time, and information warfare. So it's more coming to the NATO definition of combination of conventional and unconventional. We are back to this very traditional definition of hybrid warfare, where it's a combination of the military tools and the non-military tools, also in the digital sphere. And I think this tactical, kinetic examples that show very well, and you timed it also, how the timing correlated, and perhaps further research on that, I think, and exposing this is very useful. I agree with Maksym that there needs to be a very considerate approach to what to expose in terms of the vulnerabilities and or certain loopholes, but there are different mechanisms how this can be done and shared with allies and partners in the way that hopefully could be protected from exploitation or abuse later on. And I think it should be, right, because it really can serve as very useful lessons, but also just situational awareness raising. And perhaps my last point when it comes to international approach is really this full spectrum approach. I'm coming to my first point, which I raised, that understanding these threats in a connected way, how cyber attacks are connected to information manipulation, to these military strikes, to the physical attacks on critical infrastructure. Also understanding critical infrastructure in the broader sense of communication infrastructure, not only the energy, electricity grids, etc., and the investments into media and the role of media organizations as being also in a way critical for societal awareness and resilience. It's very important to have such an understanding that this is a landscape, threat landscape, actor landscape, but also we have responses that can be applied across different sectors to perhaps less immediate let's immediate thinking that, if we talk about disinformation or information manipulation, we can actually be fixing also the intrusions in the cyberspace across different channels, platforms, etc. So I think emphasizing the point of how all of these are connected and showing the example of Ukraine and having some kind of a depository of, all of these attacks or challenges with the responses. Because I think when it comes to the responses is indeed what we can analyze further. We are paying a lot of attention, and your article is excellent in mentioning a lot of different ways of interference and attacks. But also I find it extremely useful to be talking about the responses and perhaps doing the assessment of Ukraine with the partners and allies of did this work or not, and why, and how that could be improved. So on this countering kind of mechanisms in a way. So this is where I would like to maybe conclude it. I also like the accountability point, how different actors have to be accountable, and the other kind of regulatory measures that could be discussed, how suitable they are. But those previous ones, I would say, are my key points where I think we can really build on the Ukrainian experience to build a resilience across Europe and allies further.
Thank you very much, Nad'a, for sharing your reflection. I think you raised a bunch of really important points, and also helped us to think about it in a broader framework, how various components of cyber warfare fit into also the bigger picture, and what we need to pay attention to, what kind of actors we need to pay attention to. So thank you very much for that. I know that you unfortunately need to hop off to another call. I would really like to thank you for sharing your insights and reflections with us.
Thank you for inviting me. Thank you again.
Thank you very much, Nad'a.
For your research, Khrystyna, and the comments, the discussion. I wish you excellent second part of it. And I'm sorry I have to go, but I look forward to staying in touch. Good.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Nad'a. Khrystyna, I would like to give the floor now back to you if you would have any reflections on
yes,
what
thank
Nad'a
you.
was saying. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Zsuzsanna. When Nad'a was speaking about the interconnection between the cyber warfare, information attacks, and all of this, it brought me back to one important point that I probably didn't underline in my paper, but it surely has to be done maybe in the following research. Is that it's not only important to sort of for the sake of showing, the whole complexity of the situation, but it's also important to show these connections because of how it is being perceived on the other side. I'm trying to say that because in the Russian doctrine of informational warfare or informational counteraction, as they call it, there is no clear distinction between cyber war or informational war. For them, there is the this massive doctrine of informational counteraction, which includes the intersection of all the previously mentioned. And yes, probably them being the counterpart, I should have underlined it more, but this is the reasoning behind it, and this is why we can safely assume about the correlations or interconnectedness of certain points, because if you look at it, of course, separately, it might not make sense, but if you look at it from the point of view, what is the desired effect of a certain action, this starts making more sense. That's what I wanted to say.
Thank you very much. Yep. In the meantime, I again would like to encourage our audience to share their questions, and I would maybe circle back to what was already touched on, but also Khrystyna raised the issue for Maksym to maybe elaborate a little bit on, is the idea of prosecution of cybercrime internationally. What do you see as the potential legal avenues for that, the, well, if you will, the political appetite to really engage with this on the international level? Can we expect policy change in this regard in the near future?
Thank you for your question. I will try to answer it because it is indeed a tricky one. And when we talk about any mechanisms of international accountability for crimes, we always face the triggering issue of jurisdiction, and jurisdiction is always the thing which everyone should approach with caution, because again, we have to look at the responsibility of states and responsibility of individual actors. When it comes to responsibility of states for any such military attacks, we will mostly be talking about ICJ, which is based in The Hague, which is not ICC, and we have to remember that these are two separate courts. The International Court of Justice deals with state versus state cases. International Criminal Court deals with cases against persons who committed international crimes. I do not frankly see any prospects of state versus state case in the ICJ. Why? Because ICJ's jurisdiction is consent-based, and this consent has to be given by both state parties to the ICJ statute, or has to be treaty-based. And unfortunately, we have already seen quite creative ways of Ukraine of trying to hold Russia accountable for its misdeeds and its internationally wrongful acts on the territories of Crimea and on the occupied territories. But I do not really see I don't really see any international document which can be used to hold Russia accountable as a state for cyber attacks or for propaganda for war or whatever. Again, there is currently this case, a very inventive one based on the Genocide Convention, which Ukraine had submitted to the ICJ in the beginning of the full-scale invasion, where it tries to, where it basically asks ICJ to recognize that there was no genocide between 2014 and 2022 in Ukraine, which was used as a pretext for Article 51 of the UN Charter self-defense provisions invocation by Russia in the very beginning of invasion. But that's probably the furthest it can go. When it comes to individual liability, I think that there might be some prospects of actually trying and doing something, because attacks on civilian population or harmful effects on civilian population or attacks on civilian infrastructure, they can be qualified as international crimes. I won't really dive much deeper into that, but potentially I do see an avenue of bringing the perpetrators or the organizers liable in the ICC. On the other hand, of course, I don't really think that these types of crimes will be key for the ICC politics, right? Because when everyone is talking about genocide, everyone is talking about, I don't know, stealing and deportation of the kids, mass tortures, rapes. Cyber attacks, of course, is not like a priority thing on the political agenda. And the same goes with propaganda for war. Even though like I would, as a person who has like strong media or digital rights background primarily, I would be very happy to see some of the cases reaching ICC, just to, follow up on the case law of the ICTY and ICTR on hate speech and propaganda for war. But again, unfortunately, I do not really see it being a priority. Even on the national level, on the national level, yeah, the prospects are a bit more bright, as we can, if we can put it, because in Ukraine, in absentia judgments are possible, and in absentia prosecutions are possible, and I know that there are some at least cases which were started. They haven't really yet finished in with a definitive judgment, but there are both cases regarding cyber attacks and cases regarding like information warfare, propaganda war, and dissemination of illegal incitements against some of the most prominent persons. But again, I do fully understand that in the eyes of the international community, the judgments delivered by Ukrainian courts, they will be seen as, well, I won't say not of a great value, but of like a value. They may be seen and perceived as biased, which might be again problematic in terms of forming any approaches on how to deal with it with the future, which kind of sort of brings us back to the issue of special tribunal, which is currently being discussed internationally. EU and Council of Europe, they do kind of spearhead the efforts in establishing this court. But again, I haven't really heard much news recently about what's going on with this tribunal. Personally, I would be like more than glad to have these types of crimes included there. And as we once again know from the example of ICTY and ICTR, Special Tribunal for Sierra Leone and Special Tribunal for Lebanon and other special criminal courts, they can play a huge role in forming the practice for the future. And Ukraine's case, of course, is one of such cases. But again, when it comes to the credibility of such court, like the most credibility would come from the court established under General Assembly resolution, which is barely possible because other types of tribunals, they may lack legitimacy in the eyes of the global majority, and this is another problem we will have to face. So we indeed do live in the groundbreaking times when international law is undergoing changes, and Ukrainian civil society, and not only Ukrainian civil society, to be fair, are in that unique position where we can shape the formation of international law in this regard, or shape the reform of international law in this regard. But it has to be very carefully approached to sort of taking into account the needs of the global majority and to be credible. A lot of stuff about the fact that ICC is designed just to prosecute poor African states, and yeah, these are the things we have to face, and we're even in the land of opportunities, but be it for now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Maksym. I just want to say that 90% of the time we now heard you very well, with the exception for the last few seconds. So whatever your settings are, or however you're sitting, just please stay that way, because this is now working quite well. Khrystyna, if you have any reflections immediately, then of course, please go ahead. And I would also like to throw in two more issues. One, we by and large have touched on it already, but if you have any more comments on the question that we have in the Q&A, I will just read it out. So we will have it on the recording. So to what extent can you reasonably assert any level of coordination between cyber and kinetic actions of the Russian Federation? Are they complementary, independent, or other? I know that from various angles we touched on it, but if you want to round out any aspect of it, then please feel free to address it directly. That would be one thing I wanted to bring up. And the other thing is that we have already talked about one group of non-state actors, namely the volunteers, the so-called IT army, their legal status, and so on. But another non-state actor that we have not really touched on yet is the tech companies. And just to bring one of the most obvious examples, Starlink. So I wanted to a little bit pick your brain on this. How, like, what role do non-state, potentially international, not Ukrainian, tech companies play in this war, in the cyber resilience of Ukraine? And I would be curious in your take on whether or not it creates dependencies for the Ukrainian state on an external actor, and how that may or may not be addressed by the Ukrainian government, in your opinion. So these three big topics we still have on the table: international prosecution of cybercrime, the issue of coordination between cyber and kinetic actions, and the role of non-state actors, companies, international tech companies, namely. So please, Khrystyna.
Okay, thanks, Zsuzsanna. Yeah, I think I would start from the question that was in the Q&A, because indeed it's an excellent question, in my opinion, and we didn't address it fully. Why it's an excellent question? Because it was the most problematic probably during my entire drafting of the paper, namely because so the statement about the correlation of cyber attacks and kinetic attacks appeared as a result of this famous Microsoft report done, I don't remember, last year probably, Microsoft report about the analysis of lessons learned from the cyber war in Ukraine, like in 2022. And they provided this, I mean, I think they were the first ones to offer this sketch of correlating events. Then the Ukrainian governmental authorities responsible for cyber defense picked it up very quickly as well. And I saw several already made, like issued by Ukrainian institutions, several reports that would sort of replicate the same this very same narrative of the fact that the attacks are being correlated with the same dates. So what's the essence for the other listeners is that, like, for instance, on the same date, they were targeting like media outlets in Kiev, with cyber attacks, and then targeting the tower, the TV tower of in Kiev, like that broadcasts media everywhere. So and they basically gathered a bunch of such events that correlated in time. So to what extent we can state that they were really correlated? I think not entirely, because there was no ever like open evidence published about that this was all a part of the same plan. But at the same time, there was no evidence published that, you know, the article of Putin on what Russia has to do with Ukraine correlated with the full-scale invasion too. So these are all bits and pieces of the same like broader picture that we are trying to show. It depends, of course, on the angle. I was trying to contact Microsoft team for to speak more about this research, but unfortunately, it was not successful. So from my perspective, how I see it, we cannot deny that there is the correlation, of course, between these two facts, because, I mean, it's evident, but there is no, of course, causality. So there's no cause-effect here. We cannot say that, you know, if there was like a cyber attack before, then they like had to hit it with a missile. Like so far, then there is no information to prove it. Maybe it will be made public eventually, but so far, no. That brings me also to one issue that I wanted to raise here, is the lack of information we are forced to operate with, namely the fact that for mostly like social scientists in Ukraine. What you can get now is, and what you were able to get in the last 10 years, basically, is mostly the numbers of deterred, repelled cyber attacks that were successfully, successfully intercepted by governmental institutions, which was, I mean, great in terms of statistics and everything, but at the same time, it's a very limited information, which leaves us with this like lots of space for interpreting what exactly, intercepting an n number of cyber attacks meant. So was it because our systems are so resilient, or was it because the damage was done but not very strong damage, and so on and so forth? So that is still the situation, and it is worsening in the context of martial law, because there is the whole security rationale so I mean, before the February 22, it was not as strong, but it was still limited information. So for instance, it was very challenging to find like a number of these cases on like how many people were like convicted or for like committing cyber crimes in Ukraine, on which grounds, and so on and so forth. So it is not public. It has to be requested under the access to public information. Yeah, but eventually what you get is the numbers of a certain from the certain like either cyber police or the center of reacting to cyber incidents. So like some governmental institution reporting about the numbers, rarely about the nature of cyber attacks. So they do give you like the types. So now like the spear phishing is more dominant with regards to, I don't know, DDoS attacks, but it's a limited information, and I don't know when it's going to become more available for the analysts, but this is what we are working with right now. I don't know, maybe Maksym wants to add to this. I know he researches a lot as well.
Actually, I would probably add up not on this question, but on the other question regarding the international companies and the international tech and their involvement in the full-scale invasion. So indeed, some of the companies, such as Starlink, they have provided crucial technology to Ukraine, and well, thanks to that technology, Ukraine's army actually got a secure connection, and this was a thing which played a significant part, at least at the initial stages of the international armed conflict, and in the initial stages of the full-scale invasion. That does not really make the company itself liable for like any potential international crimes which Ukraine's armed forces might have contributed to, because this is not like the mode of liability, contrary to some of the submissions which you can find and see. There is a problem with the general consistency of any such company's policies with respect to conflict areas. If we talk about like the general standards, there are well-renowned Draghi principles, or otherwise called UN guiding human rights, the obligation towards businesses which are acting in the conflict zones, and they have to be conflict sensitive. They have to establish specific policies with respect to the conflict zones and the international armed conflict as well. And now I'm not really talking that much about like the cyber warfare domain, but I would rather talk about like the information warfare domain and social media generally. Most of the companies, they actually fail in doing this, because to help Ukraine realize it, Ukrainians like empower or realize their right to self-defense, but they never did this in a really consistent manner. And all these policy carve-outs, they were based solely on the goodwill of like the management of the companies. They were mostly never institutionalized. They were mostly never put in place. And this actually became a pretext, not like the reason, but a pretext for banning some of these companies in Russia and finally banning Facebook, Instagram, and some of the other social media in there, because their content moderation policies towards kind of allowing hate speech against Russia, even though in later decisions of the oversight board of Meta that was like framed quite correctly, that calls to exercise of the right to self-defense should not be qualified as hate speech or incitement to violence. But nonetheless, this thing exists, and there are a couple of developments on international level, mostly developed by the NGOs such as Access Now, which calls for more accountability for the companies in crisis contexts. And there is the declaration on content moderation in times of crisis developed by Access Now, so you can those who are willing to do that, you can have a look at this, which like suggests the approach and what the companies should do. And more or less the same approach is also embedded into the recent digital regulations in the European Union, such as the DSA, which is going to be in start from February 2024. So yes, indeed, this area like as it currently stands, but we'll see how it goes in the future, because this is also like an area of law which is undergoing significant and rapid development in recent, not even years, but even in the recent past, because this field is.
Thank you very much, Maksym. We are approaching the end of our designated time, so I would like to pass the floor back to Khrystyna for any concluding remarks that you may have, and then for a minute or two back to Maksym as well. Khrystyna, please.
Yeah, I wanted just to quickly add about the tech companies. So yes, indeed, I think it was like indispensable help for Ukrainian government, both financially and in terms of like hard infrastructure that they provided. But we saw, if we just fast backwards a little bit, we saw how concerned was the EU when developing this legislation about the sort of putting some limits about on big tech a couple of years before the full-scale invasion of Ukraine. I think we cannot cancel all those discussions now when they act as like ambassadors of goodwill in the war in Ukraine. They come with like certainly good intents, and it was amazing how many Starlinks the SpaceX provided, but then also the other governments from the European Union kept up sending them, but still like the leverage is in the hands of private company that is being governed by non-elected entrepreneur, and that concerns also other big tech. We can speak about like some of them are less evil, some of them are good and stuff, but what we have now is a sort of coalition of them. I mean, like there is a certain, I would say, consensus in a way that the sole country that was not like capable to provide I don't know, internet, and they substitute this service themselves. But in the future, I think we will need to reflect a lot what it would mean, in the sense that it is not for granted that we will always have this consensus, that they will always persecute like same as it is now, more or less same interests in a way of like defending Ukraine. They could have just they might have as well like done the same with Russian Federation, or like so. It is different actor, not accountable so far, and in this sense, I think it's good what Maksym underlined is the fact that the legislation that is being developed in the EU to sort of put some accountability on them, like Digital Services Act or AI Act. It is also legislation that at some point Ukraine, like following that the European path, will have to align with. So in this regard, I think it is like short term, it is very big win for Ukraine and very big support, but of course it's like a concerning development that we'll have to address medium long term. I think, yes, it's time. I will pass back floor to you, Zsuzsanna.
Thank you, Khrystyna. Maksym, any final words before we wrap up? I'm not sure we have Maksym with us. Yes, unfortunately, Maksym dropped off. So I would also then like to conclude. I would like to thank Khrystyna for her thorough research and raising so many important and currently evolving areas, topics that are worth attention and we need to monitor. I would also like to thank Maksym for taking time out of his day and joining us from Ukraine for this discussion. We really, really appreciate your contribution and insights. Also in her absence, but once more, a big thank you to Nad'a for sharing with us an international policy perspective. And finally, thank you all for joining us today. We have recorded this meeting and it is going to be available on our YouTube channel. And once again, I would like to encourage you to read Khrystyna's paper for even more information, and also to check out our ReThink.CEE fellowship applications for the next cohort, which will start next spring, are open, and we welcome applications from young policy experts, researchers, activists, analysts from Central and Eastern Europe, EAP countries, and the Western Balkans until mid-January. If you have any questions, feel free to email us with those. So once again, thank you so much for everybody, and we hope to welcome you at our next event.
Thank you very much, Zsuzsanna, for fantastic moderation, and thank you everyone who stayed till this late.